In today's episode of Transformation in a Crisis, we'll have Richard Nishk, an executive director at Apex, and he'll be chatting to Coco Cachalia, CEO of Grounded Media.
Welcome, Coco. Thank you so much for joining us today as one of our guests. And we're super excited to have you on the show. And can't wait to hear all your experience and your thought process around these challenging times. So to start us off, could you briefly tell us who and what Grounded Media is?
Sure. And Richard, thank you very much to Apex for giving me this opportunity. I am also super excited to share some of our experiences, and I hope that it can inform conversations with everybody else. So Grounded Media essentially is a social impact marketing and communications agency primarily directed towards educational and developmental communications. That's the core focus of what we do. The company started out nearly 23 years ago. It started out very much as an educational television company. At that time, South Africa was just entering its new democratic phase. There was lots of movement in government and in the SABC in order to kind of do things differently. And we formed part of that very original SABC educational offering where we were trying to take core programming for teachers, for the young people, for small business development to a broader community using television as the major delivery channel. Over the years, we've grown from that television offering into a much broader communications offering.
Brilliant. Thank you, Coco. I mean, super interesting. And just off the back of that, I can imagine that the shift has been pretty vast in terms of where you started and where you are now, which is why it's super interesting that we can, chat to you about everything today. So, firstly, congratulations on an amazing company that you have started and run over the last, 22 years. Awesome. So the next question I wanted to ask is, why is Grounded Media different and how do your core values guide the way you do business?
Okay. So as I said, we are kind of a 23-year-old company. Our staff retention rate, Richard, is an average of 15 years.
Wow.
Okay. And I think that really is one of our key differentiators. And the reason I think that we maintain staff for that length of time is because I think the kind of work we do really ignites passion in the people whom we employ. And so they've just stayed for years and years and years. And as you say, we've morphed from a television company essentially into a broader communications offering, but we've stayed very true to our objectives of education and developmental communications. The second thing is that I think a lot of the work we do with a range of clients, whether it is in the public sector, the private sector, and even with NGOs and not-for-profits, is that we really fundamentally do not believe in a hard sell. We believe that consumers are intelligent people, and we are there to provide some information and education so that they can make better and more informed decisions about their lives. So I think our values are very much that we take people as real, as intelligent. Just because we deal with lower LSMs, the core of our work sits with LSM 1 to 8. Doesn't mean people don't know what they want in life. So I think that kind of approach to our work has really what has differentiated us from a lot of other companies.
Amazing. It's really interesting that you say that. I mean, I think it goes without saying that one can't ignore how important a team and human beings are in any organization. So I really love what you're saying there. And we echo that sentiment too at Apex, humans front and center always. Awesome. So the burning question, I really understand that you've been through a lot over the years and must have learned a hell of a lot throughout that time. But COVID-19, as we discussed before starting this, has really rocked the world and changed perspectives across a whole lot of different elements in the way we do things. So I wanted to know how COVID-19 has challenged Grounded Media. How has it changed what you do?
Okay, so COVID-19 has rocked grounded media. It really has pulled the rug under our core offering. And our core offering, in lots of ways, is a model of community outreach. And that model of community outreach works in communities. It draws on people from those communities. We've got a network of community facilitators nationwide who understand dynamics in communities. And through them, we work with stakeholders, and then we get to consumers in communities. And we get to those consumers in a face-to-face way. We've been doing that, has been the key driver of what we've done. Obviously, as a communications company, that has been supported by other media. So social media, digital, radio, TV, video production sat around it. What COVID-19 has done for us has pulled that rug out of the face-to-face element and has foregrounded all those other things that sat on the periphery. So that's essentially what COVID-19 has done for grounded media. It's made us turn 360 degrees on what we do and taken what we've often done as a support and put it at the core. And the core is now no longer there, in a sense.
Crazy, Coco.
Yeah.
So off the back of that, I'm really interested to understand, what has this done to the relationships, within your staff and as well as with your clients, and how have you evolved from this?
So with clients, we've been incredibly lucky, Richard. We work with some big clients, both in the public and the private sector. And as I said before, we were already doing quite a lot, and you know this as well as we do, because we work quite closely with Apex around a lot of the offering that supports in a more digital space. So what we have gone back to clients and said, for example, with the ASISA Foundation, we've said, actually, we cannot roll out face-to-face sessions in communities anymore. Can we use radio? Can we use social and digital as the core? And the clients have been incredibly receptive to this, and particularly a client like the ASISA Foundation, who kind of prides itself on its outreach. Also, the financial sector charter itself makes provision for nearly 60% of the work that you do in that space to be a face-to-face interaction. So it's been great kudos to the clients and whomever they get their money from in turn, that they've been able to be quite open-minded about moving and shifting the emphasis. And so we've been able to do that. But that, as you can well imagine, has challenged us internally and has put quite a lot of pressure on staff who are trained to do outreach work. And now we are actually looking and seeing how we can migrate them to be doing other kinds of work, which sits much more in a digital space. So the one thing that we're absolutely clear about is that the company will keep going. It won't declare dividends for a long time, because our people, as I said right at the outset, are really what makes grounded media what it is. And what we've taken is a really, really clear decision with all the shareholders to say, how can we start putting training programs in place? There are people there that know what they're doing in the digital space. There are people there already who know there's a fully fledged television department, there's a fully fledged radio department. But how can we start migrating those people who were in our outreach department to begin to support these other departments? So we will embark on a retraining program with a lot of our staff.
Amazing. I mean, I find it really interesting. Again, this just reiterates to your point, if you're able to recruit and keep longevity of your workforce and employees, it gives you a great upper hand to be able to keep being agile and being able to trust in your team that, hey, these are some of the most challenging times in our professional careers. However, because of the foundation and the focus on putting people first, I would imagine that you've been able to mobilize the team really well, as to your point. So I think that's brilliant, Coco. Thank you. Okay, so off the back of this, there's so many unknowns moving forward and uncertainties. But in your opinion, what has COVID done to the future, or rather, what does the future of social impact interventions via community outreach programs look like? Would you imagine that this has a long-lasting effect on it? Or would you, in your opinion, imagine that once there's herd immunity or a vaccination out there, that things would return to a semi-normal state.
Yeah. So, I think, Richard, for me, one of the biggest lessons COVID-19 has thrown up for me is really the levels of inequality in South Africa across the board. And that doesn't matter what space you're playing in. This thing is affecting poor people more than it is anybody else. We've got lives versus livelihood debate. We've got all of that sort of thing. In the work that we do, what it's really showing is that actually this migration to digital platforms, important as it is, and it is something that I don't think is going to go away, partly to answer your question. I think it should be there and it should stay forever. But the real challenge is actually reaching the kinds of people we want to on these digital platforms. And until South Africa learns to open up much more its data capability for poorer people, to bring the cost of data down, to ensure that connectivity in communities is at such a level that allows people to engage meaningfully in the content that we put across. Until that really happens, we're tinkering at the surface of some of this stuff here. So whilst I'm completely embracing a new digital approach to stuff, I would like it in the future to be paired with our more face-to-face stuff if that comes back in any fashion or form. And I don't think that that's going to come back anytime soon. But if it does, because I think a lot of people that we deal with actually really value the fact that we take the time out to actually speak to them face-to-face. People in communities like that. What we do need to do now is to show that you can do a similar thing. You can have that same kind of personalized communication through digital channels. But I think we're a long way in South Africa of actually reaching our target audiences effectively in that way. We're starting to do it. I think there needs to be a lot more from government side, from the private sector side, to come to the party to ensure that we're able to do this effectively.
Absolutely. I think you make two really pertinent points there. I mean, I can't agree more that, human intervention again is completely necessary, and the marriage of that and digital needs to kind of walk hand in hand. I think second to that, the really interesting points around the cost of connectivity and similarly the access to this connectivity within South Africa. I think the stats speak for themselves. We're one of the most expensive mobile data countries in the world, and our smart device penetration is still relatively low, around 50%. So I think there are a lot of challenges outside of just the, implications of COVID-19 that as a country and as service providers, we need to start ripping down those barriers to really, truly start seeing that harmony between human and technology and digital.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Okay, so that leads quite nicely into the next question. I think you have answered this already, but I wanted to ask, I know that it's been a really long journey and incredible one in that, but your exposure to different technologies over the last 23 years must have been absolutely vast. So I'd really like to understand how technologies, in respect that, human is front and center, but how has technologies changed the way that you operate across the last 23 years of doing business?
Yeah, so it really is quite interesting in some ways, because we have we use television, which is technology, right at the outset, and that was through the national broadcaster, and then it was supported heavily by making video production for government departments to explain new policy developments. Remember, that was quite an exciting time in South Africa. You had changes in education, you had changes in health, you had changes in the labor department, and we used video technology very, very effectively to communicate the different way in which government was operating. But what's really interesting is, as we grew from that television thing, we then grew organically into radio production, because our LSM was an LSM 1 to 8, as I said. Radio is hugely penetrated in those areas. It was also much cheaper to make radio programs than it was to make television programs. So it was a kind of natural migration or inclusion of radio and television as the two core technological ways of doing it. But what's really interesting is, in the midst of all of that, we kept up with that technology, But that's when we discovered the outreach model, which was kind of a face-to-face model. So in a sense, technology then started to take a slight backseat, and we went much more further with our kind of face-to-face model, which was less reliant on technology. Obviously, it used technology in it, so we did radio programs sometimes to support it. We used video very effectively in the delivery of our programs because that just enhanced the interactivity, it enhanced the excitement, all of that sort of thing. But in a sense, we kind of went back from technology for a while. And now we're coming full circle, and we're looking to utilize those same technologies of radio and television, but obviously expanding it into the much more digital space. And that's where the challenge is sitting with Grounded Media, is how we continue to use the digital space optimally. So how do we continue to convey our content in ways that truly resonate with people? And how do we do it in ways that it's not just an awareness campaign, but it is much more an in-depth educational campaign? And that's the challenge that we're sitting with, and we're learning at the moment. And we're learning with you, Richard. We're learning with Apex. We're learning with other people. And we'd really like to get ahead of the game in this space as soon as possible.
Thank you, Coco. I mean, it's a really interesting journey, and I love that you've taken it in different phases and been able to say, all right, well, let's put focus back into outreach programs. Again, back to what we discussed earlier, couple that with strong technology to execute an end-to-end solution here. One question I do have around that, Coco, with outreach programs, it's amazing because it's human to human, and technology often lacks that element. But from a reaching and a scale point of view, reaching as many people as possible, what kind of limitations have you experienced with outreach in terms of ability to reach the millions of people kind of requiring your interventions?
Yeah, no, it is a challenge. So by definition, outreach, number one, is expensive because it's a huge logistical exercise and it comes with many, many costs associated with it, which in the long term is not really sustainable. I mean, we do it in South Africa effectively because of particularly in financial education, because the charter requirement says that 60% of your budget needs to be spent on face-to-face. But it is an expensive way of doing it, and it isn't a sustainable way going forward. So yes, absolutely, we have to be looking at these different kinds of technologies in order, number one, to reach scale, and number two, to then be much, much more cost effective in terms of how we reach people. So we found that radio, and particularly now with kind of community radio, with regional radio, and then obviously with national radio, and also with radio's capability these days of utilizing digital platforms themselves. So they've got very strong either WhatsApp facility or they've got very strong social media facility. We found that radio is probably going to be, in the first instance, supported again by these other things, one of the better ways in which we're going to get these conversations going with people and allow for that kind of level of interactivity. Again, it's more expensive than pure digital, but maybe it's a kind of a phased approach about how you use it, because people are au fait with radio, particularly in our kind of target market. And now they're building the capability of using WhatsApp for business, definitely social media in terms of Facebook, and then how do we build all of that around it? And then hopefully through that, we begin to scale much more and move away from using them purely as awareness platforms, but using them as proper educational platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really love is that, we've got to take things and, the context of the reality of our landscape and socioeconomic climate. So, I really love your approach because, it needs to be focused on what is the reality and what are the best channels to reach as many people as possible right now. At the same time, as to your point, also having clarity and vision on, the shift as the climate starts changing and, the cost of connectivity and access starts dropping. So I really love that response. Thank you, Coco. Finally, in closing, I've got two more questions here. The first question I have is the advice for other social impact organizations and NGOs. And off the back of this, what, in your opinion, does a way forward look like in terms of addressing key problem areas within the South African landscape and challenging socioeconomic climate?
The biggest advice I think I can give, which is really the kind of story of grounded media, is evolve. Don't get stuck in a particular mode. The minute you get stuck in a particular mode, somebody's going to come and disrupt you along the line. And then next thing you're going to find either you're out of business or you're scrambling on how to catch up, and you're always going to be on your back foot. So really embrace, I think our success story was, yes, we were a television company. Yes, we made great television programs. But we recognized quite early on that just making television wasn't going to keep us going in the long run, because television was expensive. It was one way of communicating. It probably was an effective way of communicating, but there were other equally effective ways of doing it. So my biggest advice, I suppose, and what I think my company has managed successfully, is be agile. Read the writing on the wall. Don't wait until the last minute. Sometimes things give you great margins, and so you continue to do them just because they do that. And so your profit lines are good. But it's short-sighted at the end of the day. Keep your eye on the ball and see where the world is going, and try and keep as agile in that space as you possibly can.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Coco. I'd love to chat all day, because I really find all your knowledge and opinions on everything fascinating, but unfortunately we're out of time. So again, big thank you from Apex for taking the time to chat to us. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing in this space for so many people out there who critically need these interventions. So we take our caps off to you, and on behalf of Apex, we really look forward to working with you long into the future.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It's really great to share. So I'm very happy to be able to have done that, and I look forward to an ongoing relationship with Apex.
Thanks so much, Coco. Brilliant.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very, very much.